What's up? What's up? What's up, everybody? We're back again with another episode of the Pop-Up Podcast for Preachers or PKs. I'm the PK, Preacher's Kid, and with me, my friend and yours, the Preacher.
The Reverend. Preacher? That's all I get.
Oh, I thought I wanted you to finish it. Reverend Andre M.
Yes, the Preacher, the Pastor, Rev Andre M.
The Preacher, the Pastor, the Bishop.
The Big Brother.
The Big Brother. Yeah. The oldest, my wise mentor over the years. How many times have I not followed your advice?
The younger you were, you followed my advice about 20% out of 80%.
Yeah.
The older you get, it's at least 50-50 now.
50-50 now, yeah. Okay.
I'm making some headway.
I'm getting better. Yeah, I can remember the time where me and Mama went to Florida on a trip, and I had saved up some money, and you said, don't spend all your money on shoes. And I came back from Florida and I had like 5 pairs of shoes. And he was like, I specifically told you that.
Yeah, and I said specifically on Jordans that you can't afford.
And yeah, so
anyway. The ones you bought were fire, though.
They were fire. And they lasted, what, about 2 years?
Yeah, so. And you came back broke.
Yeah, exactly. So, but we're back again. And, you know, how are you doing? It's been a little bit. How you been doing?
I've been doing well. Well, there's been moments of feeling overwhelmed, but I say moments because it doesn't stay forever. You get back up, you move on. But so overall, I'm well.
Yeah, I've been feeling the same way. Sometimes overwhelmed, frustrated. You know, a lot going on, but it's like, you know, part of this is like I asked for it, and then another part is like I'm just trying to. It's like a developmental thing where I'm trying to grow into the right person that can handle the right things, either cut some things off or just handle the things that I now have in my hands, so to speak.
Yeah, I've been using the phrase show up as your authentic self. And when I can't show up as my authentic self, that's when I know I'm getting a little overwhelmed. My authentic self, I'm usually happy, joyous, laughing. When I get into that mode where I'm just serious, I'm kind of dragging, I know something's going on.
Yeah. And so what do you do in those times? How do you know, we've talked about this before, but it seems like a lot of people are interested in hearing from God and knowing what to do and how to do at all times, but probably especially times when you're overwhelmed. So how do you hear from God when you're overwhelmed?
It's funny. You can't start when you're overwhelmed. You have to start in other times. A story our dad used to tell all the time about watching a documentary about counterfeit money. They said in order to learn about counterfeit money, they never showed them counterfeit money. They only showed them the real.
Wow.
And the more they stay with the real, the counterfeit was able to be seen and picked out.
Yeah, that's good.
So when you are not overwhelmed, and that's the problem that a lot of people have, that's when they don't connect with God. I don't need them. You know, things are going good, money's rolling in.
Yeah.
That's when you need to hear from God. Because if you can hear from God when things are up, then that echo becomes much louder when things are down.
Yeah.
For example, in the scriptures called like a valley, but actually in the valley there's an echo. Because a valley is usually the place between two mountains.
Ooh, that's deep.
So you can hear then.
Yeah.
Hearing on the mountaintop can be difficult. So if you can hear on the mountaintop, then you can hear in the valley.
Wow. And so many of us get on the mountaintop and forget to connect, forget to listen, forget to even try to clean the earwax out of our ears because everything is sweet and everything is flowing and your bills is paid, you hanging out, having a good time in life. And it's like, I don't need to go somewhere and cry and pray because I'm fine.
Yeah. Old song, traditional song said life is filled with swift transitions. And so if you're up now, there's no guarantee you're going to be up forever.
Yeah.
Swiftly, you could be down. But if you go down, you can come back up. You just got to learn how to listen in the high times and the happy times. And that's how I've learned how to train myself to hear God when things are happy. And so even when I say show up as my authentic self, that means I got to process who I am. Who am I? How do I feel? So when I'm happy, why am I happy? What made me happy?
Yeah.
Then I can kind of diagnose, now that I'm sad, okay, what made me sad? What happened? Is it something I've been doing? It reminds me of something that happened to you some years ago when Ray first came out. You remember that?
Mm-mm.
Oh, the movie Ray came out and you loved it, and then you went and bought a bunch of Ray's music and was listening to it.
Yeah.
Then all of a sudden you was wondering why you was depressed. And I think it's our Uncle Derek is like, dude, you've been listening to the blues
Yeah.
for like
Exactly.
7 straight weeks, man. That's why. So when you can pinpoint, it was a change in music. So there's nothing wrong with his music, but maybe I don't need to have so much doses of it.
Yeah.
And as you process and learn, then you begin to learn, okay, you grow from it. Okay, I can't do that, or I need to limit myself in that.
Yeah.
And all those things help us hear from God.
That's hilarious because I love that song to this day. It's Hard Times by Ray Charles. But now that you bring that back up, I do recall when I started to listen to that, and it was like, I could go through the lyrics right now. I won't, but it's like it was just a cool, song. But yeah, it was the blues. And so it was affecting my mood and the way I viewed things, even without me knowing it in my conscious mind. Right, my conscious mind, I'm trying to figure out why I'm upset, but in my subconscious mind, I've infused the blues and sadness and losing money, losing your girl, losing your mom, losing all this losing and sadness. I had a little soundtrack to my life that it wasn't even my life. It was just a hit song that was bluesy. So. No, that's a good example.
And like pastor, I don't know why I'm attracted to dope boys all the time. Well, your favorite song is the 10 Crack Commandments.
Right.
It's a possibility that's affecting your subconscious, your choices.
Yeah.
So you learn that. And it's actually, we're laughing about it. It's funny when you realize how simple some of the stuff is.
Yeah.
Like, if I can just make these simple adjustments. Like major cruise ships turn from a simple rudder, a small rudder.
Yeah.
It's a small thing that can actually make major turns. It can make a, 20 ton, I'm probably not even saying it right, several tons of steel turn with a small rudder. So sometimes life is one in the small things.
Yeah. And you know what's funny? I remember when we were young, I think you were in the room. I don't know. I think it was me, you, Jonathan in the room. I remember us being young, or if not, it was me and Jonathan, and we was playing Boys to Man or something on a cassette tape. For folks who don't know what a cassette tape is, we'll link a video so you can learn what that is. But Boys to Man was playing. I remember Daddy coming in there and just like turning it off, ripping the cassette tape out. And I just remember being like nervous and scared because it's like, we messed up. We was listening to, worldly music. And I remember another time when I had got saved again at church for like the 1,000th time. I had to be like 12 or 13 at this point. And I remember like taking all my CDs at the time, which was like Usher. It was Puff Daddy and Mace, not too proud of that right now, but it was what was it? I forget that Puff and Mace song. It was like
More Money.
Broken Glass everywhere. If it ain't about the money, Puff, I just don't care.
Wasn't that More Money, More Problems?
It was the one before. It was in that era.
Oh, okay.
More Money was the bigger one, but I took all those CDs and broke them because I was trying to. Well, Daddy was like disciplining us, and we was like under a regime at that time that wasn't totally like legalistic when you think of how people exercise out their Christianity, but it was like it brings up the question, or it bodes the question: can you hear from God when you listening to a bunch of worldly? If you're familiar with the terminology I'm using, worldly type music. And I remember, even to this day, I'll tell people who are going through bad situations, I said, well, look, if you're having a tough time, one thing I say do is play worship music. Get some worship music on. If you're having a bad week, a bad month, a bad year, like get as much like godly Christian music on and in your ear just to like lift your spirit and lift your consciousness of your connection to God and all of that. But I wonder, like in our day and age, when we're talking about you being overwhelmed and how do you discern God in these times, and knowing that there's a lot of Christians now who ain't really on that. They're not going to be mad at you if you playing the 10 Crack Commandments, which is an old school Biggie song. But if you playing, Skilla Baby or whoever is the new artist now, which I don't really know at all because I'm getting so old. But this idea that can you hear from God when you listening to a bunch of different stuff. And I don't know if it's necessarily wrong, because it's like Daddy cut that music off because it felt like it was wrong. It was worldly. It was carnal. It didn't necessarily remind you of God or bring glory to God in any sort of way. But, maybe it just wasn't good for you. And so I just wonder what your thought is on that. I know I said a lot there, but what's your thought on that?
Well, I'll attack it two ways. So one, if all you're listening to is the Bible and biblical stuff, do you really need discernment about other things if that's the only thing you're in?
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes, and we've kind of touched on this before, but that's kind of like a cheap way, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
So one cheap way to get to deliverance is through avoidance.
Right.
Just avoid it until you can get delivered. And that's fine, but I say it's a cheap way because you really don't know what you have because you're not tested.
Mm-hmm.
It's one thing to talk about how great your boxer you are, but if you've never been in the ring.
Yeah, you ain't never taken a punch.
So it's, I'll take your word that, hey, I think you're a great fighter, but you've never really been in the ring.
Right.
So those people who need discernment are sometimes the ones who are actually going to be in the ring.
Mm.
So that may be the ones who are going to listen to the music. And let's say if you're a Christian and you're in the music industry, how do you get around not listening to the music, not knowing the music?
Right.
So learning how to discern when, okay, enough is enough.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just, we're talking about music, but that's just anything. And we're talking about spiritual things, but let's take it to something natural. How do you know when you've eaten too much? Or I'm full. You ever had a great meal and the people come by and say, hey, you save room for a dessert? I'm like, nah, I mean, it looks good, but I know I've ate too much.
Right.
Now, when you are a child, you want the ice cream before the meal. You want before the macaroni. Give me the ice cream. Give me the Kool-Aid. But the older you get, you realize, I don't need all that. And so you learn and you grow. And I think for some people, they always want to go back to that example. They always want to take the dessert off the table. That makes it easier. If they don't offer you the dessert, you don't have to say no. But it's better to get to the place where you can look at it and say, no, I'm full. I've had enough. I don't need it. So if you treat certain things like dessert, like extra, if I've read my word, if I prayed, having some dessert is not gonna kill me. Mm-hmm. But is it too much?
Yeah.
If I'm working on a goal, if I'm at my 2,000 calorie limit, that 580 calorie cheesecake, that's not going to be good for me. So learning and knowing, I think that's really important. And another thing, I think I'll use a child example again. But for example, your kids, if you come in their room and they're playing Baby Shark, which your oldest is like 4 and 2. Yeah, that's not an issue.
Right.
You come in there and they're playing Little Baby, or it's playing in there. You would stop it. It's like, nah,
I don't want y'all listening.
Yeah, I don't want you. But if they're 25, 26. You don't take it and stop it. You just made me say, hey, is that what you should be listening to? Mm-hmm. Can you handle it? And some of them, they may say, yeah, Dad, we can handle it. And you can look at their life and say, yeah, they can handle it. Mm-hmm. But by the same token, if they were 26 listening to Baby Shark, you might wonder.
Yeah, why are you listening to Baby Shark?
I mean, it's cool if you still like it.
Yeah.
But you might wonder why. Why do you still like that? And so sometimes people who listen to worship music, it's their scapegoat. They really don't know how to function outside of, they can't live. Like if they hear a song from Al Green, they act like they're going to lose their salvation. Or they hear the chord from Marvin Gaye's Let's Get It On. They act like they have been doused with sin.
Yeah.
I'd much rather deal with people who can handle things, but they have the discernment to know, okay, there's enough is enough. Limitations. Yeah. They understand limitations, they understand boundaries, they understand guardrails. Those, to me, are people who are the most mature.
Yeah, because we talked about this and either you talked about it in a sermon recently or in, on the podcast where, Jesus hung around sinners, right? So Jesus wasn't so sterile and clean and so perfect in the way that he couldn't have dinner with somebody that was, you know, quote unquote dirty and sinful. And so if we're looking at him as our example of maturity, then you might be able to, I guess, reconcile the fact that, yeah, I could listen to this type of music, but to your point, how much music do I need to listen to? Or how am I mature enough? Do I know when to stop? Do I know when, okay, yeah, Jesus had dinner with them, but it, doesn't say that they were all his disciples either. I mean, even though his disciples had scattered past, like it doesn't say that he had dinner with them every day, right? But he wasn't avoiding them completely. So I like that. I think that's good for hearing from God, discerning how to move in this earth, and and jumping back to when you're overwhelmed. Hopefully, to your point, this ain't the first. You're not just coming to God when you're overwhelmed, so you kind of have an idea of what steps to take and what to do with your life.
Yeah. Just something you said just made me think of this example. Let's say we've got a glass of water under a sink. A drop of food coloring is dropped into that glass. How many drops does it take to change the color? Just one.
Oh, yeah.
So if all you have is just that glass of water, then maybe a song could mess you up. Mm-hmm. Maybe interacting with a sinner could mess you up. But if the faucet is on and there's continually fresh water flowing into that glass,
that's good.
A couple drops are not really going to harm you because it's always consistently being flushed out.
Right.
You're going to have more clean in there than you have anything.
That's good.
And so that goes to the point of always staying in that posture of, even when you're in good times, of hearing from God, listening to God. So then if you do get a drop of whatever, whether it's something sinful or maybe an overwhelming season, you're consistently under that faucet.
Yeah.
All the time. You're going to stay fresh. You're going to stay clean. Problem with most people is they don't have the faucet on, and they take drop after drop after drop after drop.
Yeah, and now you're contaminated.
You're so full. You're so contaminated.
That's a great example for multiple reasons, because I'm in the business world, and I think about this personally often. Like, should I have went to preaching? Should I have, stayed with you and just been in the ministry full time? Or should I be here in the business world where I'm frequently interacting with people who are cussing? But the difference is, when I'm in business and people are cussing or joking or saying things that may be deemed bad by at least my mom, if nobody else, then, they're not scared to do it in front of me. When I was back and mostly doing ministry with my life, and we were dealing with people that were really struggling with addiction and stuff, they would really guard watch themselves. It would be rare for them to kind of let their guard down in front of me. And if they did, they'd apologize really quickly. And so I say that because I'm in this world, and I feel like when people are their real selves, yeah, they do listen to this music. Like, it isn't a $1 billion industry for nothing. Like, The real fact is that folks come to church and they kind of put on this different self, which is good, it's respectful. You should honor the house of God. But it's like, I think 80% of the people outside of church, and this was kind of shocking for me, they cuss, they drink, they smoke, they gamble, they do these vices, and maybe when they come to church, they don't do them, but that's their real life in a sense. And so I like the fact that I don't have to be so sterile with people in this environment. But I'm like, how do I keep myself clean in this? In a sense, clean. But I do have a good practice of, reading my Bible, praying, listening to worship music, getting counsel from different leaders and stuff. So I feel like that's sort of a description of my life in a sense. And what I've found now that I've got some years of data behind this is that I don't feel, like I'm further from God. I feel like I'm closer to God. Even though and I don't know if I'd be much closer if I was in the church, but you would think I'd be most close only because I was working in ministry. Mm-hmm. But I feel just as close working like in the actual world, like environment. I feel like I'm, being used in that way. And it's refreshing to know that I'm not just completely contaminated because I listen to things, hear things, and people are their full selves around me. Rather, there's this idea that you just shared that I can be in the world, but not of the world, in the sense that I can keep fresh water flowing, fresh spiritual knowledge, fresh spiritual intelligence flowing through me that allows me to still move and operate.
Yeah. And sometimes I envy the regular layman in terms of when people find out I'm a pastor, they automatically shift and adjust.
Yeah.
Unless, it's so weird. And like I said, it's hard for me to get to their authentic self because I'm nobody for them to put on airs for.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, God watches everything.
Yeah.
So don't make me something that you have to adjust for me. But I understand it. It's part of the title, the honor.
Yeah.
And,
because people should honor your role, your responsibility. Like it would be, you'd also, especially some church mothers would say, okay, that's the pastor, or
Yeah.
It's like there's this aura that comes with that you should sit up a little bit straighter because the pastor is in the room. But I could see the downside of that too. It's like, no, just be yourself.
Yeah, because sometimes you want to reach people where they are, and it's hard to reach them where they are if they're putting on
a show
up front.
Yeah.
And so one of the things I have to do is I have to be real. I have to let my guard down and show the realness.
Yeah.
So sometimes I love purchasing shirts that have Christian phrases, things about God, but sometimes I won't wear those in certain settings because I want to blend in. I want to see. The Bible calls us the light of the world, and light shines best actually in darkness.
Wow.
Doesn't shine best in light. So your light is really not going to shine the best in church. It's going to shine the best in places where it's dark. And so sometimes we do, not everybody can't handle it, but we do need people to be in the marketplace, to be in certain areas because your light shines. So I've checked it out. And so I've been in spaces, especially when I was working now, because I'm a chaplain on my job. Everybody knows I'm a pastor. I'm the chaplain. But before, I wouldn't say anything about me being a pastor or preacher. I talk to people. I work with them. 3-4 days into working, that first week, they start telling me their life story. They start asking me advice. I'm like, it's like I got something. There's a light shining. And then later on, maybe a month later, hey, why didn't you tell me you was a pastor? I was cussing around you. I was doing blah, blah, blah. But I was like, did you enjoy talking to me? I was like, yeah, you was cool. You listened to me. You gave me advice. And they're like, so what's the problem?
Right.
So my light was actually shining. So and not that I'm against where I am now because there's a level of graduation, elevation. So I know who I am now, but it was good to see without the Christianese, without the Christian bumper sticker,
right,
that people were drawn to me.
Yeah.
And another saying, that this is not to call the people that, but bugs are drawn to the light. So light attracts, light draws, and if you only keep the light in the light, it doesn't work. It has to shine in darkness. Yeah. Another thing, the scripture that you use, I had a revelation about that. It says that we are in the world, but we're not of the world.
Right.
I thought of fish. Fish are in the water, but they're of the water. So when you pull a fish out of the water, it can't survive because not only is it in it, it's of it. So I always forget the term, we're mammals or whatever.
Right.
So we can be in the water, but since we're not of the water, once we come out of the water, we're perfectly fine. You can go and you can swim for hours and come out and be okay because we are of oxygen. We're not of the water.
Right.
So if you're not of something, you can be in it and come out of it and go back in it and come out of it and still be okay.
Yeah.
But since we are of oxygen, if you get too much water in and you don't get enough oxygen, you can drown in the water.
Right.
You can function in it, but you got to make sure you can breathe. You got to make sure you have to have certain techniques. And so that's another thing, learning about discernment. Going into the world, you have to have certain techniques. Some of the techniques, okay, when do I need to go?
Yeah.
When have I had too much? When have I had too much food coloring without enough fresh water? You understand. Going to the swimming example, in order to swim, You don't go in jeans and a sweatshirt and a hoodie and a hat. No, you dress for what you're going into.
Right.
Because if it's too heavy, it brings me down. So you have to know your environment. You got to know what you're going in. And then if you're being the light, you'll know. And you also know when your light's dim because people around you, they be like, say, something off. Something not right. And I do remember in college, because since I grew up in the church, I wanted to cuss. And I loved to cuss, but I wasn't good at it like everybody else. And so I was cussing, and some dude was like, "Man, it don't even sound right when you cuss." I'm like, "What?" I'm trying my hardest, man. I'm listening to Pac and Biggie. I'm trying to get the lingo down, but I was not of the world.
Yeah.
So the more I tried to fit in the world, it just didn't work.
Yeah, and I like that. So you can function in the world, but you got to be able to. And when we say the world, I hate using those terms that I feel like people may not understand, even though if you come from any type of church, you do understand it, right? But I you can be in like things that aren't so spiritual, that aren't so holy, that's just like watching the game or going to the bar, God forbid, or going to a party. You can function. There's a certain way to function in those spaces, which I think is revelatory. Like that is like, huh? For some Christians, like, how can I be at the party and still be the Christian? And it's like there is a way to function in that with the right amount of discernment. And I like what you said earlier. Like even when you are overwhelmed, it doesn't last long. So there's like this time stamping of, okay, I may be in a place, but I don't have to stay in that place. Even if it's not a physical place, but a mental state or a state of overwhelm or a state of, I think that's one of the, perks, one of the benefits of being connected spiritually is that I can tap in and out of places because I can tap into my spirit and into like, I can kind of navigate and function in and out of things that maybe other people will get stuck in or would drown in, whether it be a worldly type party or a depressive type, mental state. And that's
you can apply it to anything.
Yeah.
Yeah. Some people are just overworking. Some of it is like it could be stress. It could be what you call worldly things. It could be a lot of things. It's funny. I ran across a TikTok today, and it'll kind of take us off, but it'll come back to the same point. But it was a girl who was in the Hollywood scene, and she was talking about she's been to several Diddy parties, but nothing ever happened to her. And she explained why. She said she grew up in the hood. And one thing she learned in the hood is that you can't allow peer pressure. You got to stand up for yourself. So she's like, once she did show up in Hollywood and end up in those parties, she didn't partake. Her no meant no, because from her environment that she came from, she had already learned the lessons of how to stand up for herself, to know when game was being run on her. She said, but there's other girls that fell for the okie doke and was falling for stuff. She even talking about someone who tried to put something in her drink. She noticed it just by the way it tasted on her tongue. She's like, this ain't right.
Something ain't right.
So when they turned, she dumped it because she understood the game.
Right.
She wasn't naive. And the scripture says we're not ignorant of Satan's devices. So once you learn and you're trained like that counterfeit money, once you're trained with the real money, you pick up on the counterfeit.
Yeah.
I could pop in a Diddy party for whatever reason and realize, something's going on beyond just a networking session. So, hey, 10:30, I'm out. Why you always leave at 10:30? I got other stuff I got to do. But you have a certain spidey sense. No, something there, I don't need to be here. And people like that, they survive.
Yeah.
And so you can survive anything. I always say this because it happened to me when I was working in my job. I used to work around acid. And it was acid. They would actually show on the bottle that it would cut straight through your hand. One touch, it cut through skin, bone, and everything.
Wow.
But the reason why I was able to do it, we dressed for it. We had certain stuff we were able to dress for it. So I could go in that environment with acid and come out and be fine every time. They call it PPE, personal protective equipment.
Yeah.
As long as I was dressed properly, I could deal with all that kind of stuff, come out. I knew when I need to put on the mask, put on the shield, whatever. Flip it spiritually, the Bible says that we have the armor of God.
Mm-hmm.
We're dressed. So when you're dressed, you're not just dressed for church. You don't really need the armor of God for church.
Yeah.
You need the armor of God for being out there.
And the acid.
Where the world is, where the acid is, but you're protected. And you understand, but one of the things that we had, it could tear easily.
Mm-hmm.
But if it ripped, you don't play around it. You go get a brand new one.
Mm-hmm.
Because a little small rip, that acid can come in there and tear you up. You didn't play with it.
Did you know anybody that got hurt or damaged in there? Or?
No, because once we were trained, they showed us videos of, no, this is what it could be.
Could do. So people were very careful.
Yeah, it scared you straight like that. Yeah, I always say you want to go home the same way you came. You want to return with all your limbs, all that kind of stuff.
Wow.
So there was a level of being scared straight. And so sometimes being in the church and hearing about hell and hearing about negative consequences, that should be enough to scare you enough to say, okay, if I do go in these environments, that's not bad. I just got to be dressed for it.
Right.
Make sure I'm dressed. And also realizing I have an enemy who is trying to take me out.
Yeah.
So I need to recognize game when I see it.
Yeah.
Move how I need to move. Bounce when I need to bounce. And some of the problem people have is the FOMO, the fear of missing out. Some people stay too long because, I'm worried that I'm going to miss out on something. Some people got shot because they stayed too long.
Right.
You got to know, I'm not worried about missing out. I'm trying to protect my life. I'm trying to be what I need to be. So I think once you have that mentality, you don't have to be so super spiritual that you can't go nowhere, can't do anything. You can move. You can, as we say, you can be outside.
Yeah.
But you also know how to stay
protected. Yeah.
And when you value what you have, you don't just jeopardize it by doing kind of crazy stuff.
Yeah. I've talked about some of what you just touched on in my book that it isn't released yet, but I talk about how kids, especially Christian kids or PKs in particular, a lot of that fear of missing out. I want to go try drinking. I want to go try it. And that's where, I personally ran into a lot of issues thinking I'm going to go drinking with everybody, not knowing that, if you had any street smarts, you would realize you don't drink on an empty stomach. And you especially don't drink nothing straight on an empty stomach. And we'll talk about that another day, my full story there. But, that was a lack of street smarts and a lack of discernment. But, just knowing how to navigate if you're going to be in these spaces, I think is really important, like you said, and getting that discernment. So that's dope. I think we should probably got to wrap it up for today, but what would be your final thought on discernment?
Yeah, the final thought is we are created in the image of God. So his voice is the most natural to us once we find it. It becomes very natural. It's what we were born to have, for example, if I look at my Alexa and say, hey, Siri, the Alexa never responds. It's waiting to hear Alexa.
Yeah.
And so sometimes our spirit is waiting to hear God's voice. And once we tap into it, it'll be the best thing ever. And you'll want to train and you'll want to develop it. You'll want to grow it. So I would say that once you find it and tune it in, it'll change your life in the good way and you'll want to stay on that path.
Yeah, I agree. I think we got some big decisions coming up in business and it's like, I just want to know the right move. And it's like, I am praying, trying to tap in, okay, God, is this the right move? Is that the right move? So I can tap into the right thing for me. So I want to be close. I want to hear that voice, but I like how you said it's the more natural thing. So it's almost like if you have to force it, instinctively, it's like you already connected to God. You just have to tap into the fact that that is what you're connected to and make sure all these other things, you can kind of recognize, no, I'm not really connected to that. I'm more connected to God. So I love that. All right, y'all. It's the Pop-Up Podcast. We'll be back again soon. It's your boy, Stephen Motivate.
Rev. Andre M., also known as Pastor Andre Mitchell.
Peace.